Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The explanation by Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu of how a person can be liberated even in this body is more elaborately explained in this verse. The living entity who has become Satyadrik, who realizes his position in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, may remain apparently merged in the 5 elements of matter, the 5 material sense objects, the 10 senses, and the mind and intelligence, but still he is considered to be awake and to be freed from the reaction of false ego. Here the word Leena is very significant. The Mayavadi philosophers recommend merging in the impersonal effulgence of Brahman. That is their ultimate goal or destination. That merging is also mentioned here. But in spite of merging, one can keep his individuality. The example given by Jiva Goswami is that a green bird that enters a green tree appears to merge in the color of greenness, but actually the bird does not lose its individuality. Similarly, a living entity merged either in the material nature or in the spiritual nature does not give up his individuality. Real individuality is to understand oneself to be the eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord. This information is received from the mouth of Lord Chaitanya. He said clearly upon the inquiry of Sanatana Goswami that a living entity is a servitor of Krishna eternally. Krishna also confirms in Bhagavad Gita that a living entity is eternally his part and parcel. The part and parcel is meant to serve the whole. This is individuality. It is so even in this material existence, when the living entity apparently merges in matter. His gross body is made up of 5 elements. His subtle body is made of mind, intelligence, false ego, and contaminated consciousness. And he has 5 active senses and 5 knowledge acquiring senses. In this way, he merges in matter. But even while merged in the 24 elements of matter, he can keep his individuality as the eternal servitor of the Lord. Either in the spiritual nature or in the material nature, such a servitor is to be considered a liberated soul. That is the explanation of the authorities, and it is confirmed in this verse. We have heard this many times, that a devotee who is acting in Krishna consciousness is actually liberated from the body, even though he is within the body. This seems to be very difficult to understand, especially for the non-devotees. Even though they may be transcendentalists, they don't accept that one can be liberated even while living in the material body. They always talk of liberation after one is completely freed from the material body, material mind, etc. But Srila Prabhupada explains many places by quoting one particular verse from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which in this purport he has not quoted the verse, but he has just cited. Rupa Goswami explains this: Iha yasya harer dasye karmana manasa gira nikhilaswapi avasthasu jivan muktasa uchyate. Srila Rupa Goswami says, Jivan Mukta, even while living in a material body, he is liberated. Under what conditions? If while living in this material body, a person is fully engaged in devotional service. Harer Dasye, as a servant of the Supreme Lord, as a devotee of the Supreme Lord, he engages karmana manasa gira. He engages entirely his body, mind and words completely in the service of the Supreme Lord, Krishna. Then, nikhilasvapi avastha. So whatever be the condition of the person, it doesn't matter. He is liberated. So, Srila Prabhupada offers explanation, very nice explanation in so many different ways. In the Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada says, when one acts in Krishna consciousness for the satisfaction of the senses of Krishna, any action, whether of the body, mind, intelligence, or even of the senses, is purified of material contamination. This is the important point. What happens when one engages in the service of Krishna for Krishna's satisfaction? Anukulyena Krishnanushilanam. This is the standard of pure devotional service. Pure devotional service means we do devotional service for pleasing Krishna, for satisfaction of Krishna. It is not for my benefit. It is not for my gain. It's not for my satisfaction. It is for the satisfaction of Krishna. So such devotional service is called pure devotional service. And the characteristic of pure devotional service is, even if one is performing an action with a material body, material mind, material senses, such action is completely pure of any material contamination. That's because there are no material reactions resulting from the activities of a Krishna conscious person. No reactions. This is explained in earlier chapters, akarma. Those activities for which there are no material reactions. So the reason is, a devotee is free from reactions. The reason is that Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. After explaining what are the three modes and how they entangle us in this world, what is its influence, what are the individual influences, Krishna finally, before he concludes the chapter, Arjuna asks a question. How can one transcend the three modes of material nature? So for that question, Krishna's reply is, Mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate. Now this is in the 14th chapter. If you remember, in the 13th chapter, while describing 20 items of knowledge, the same avyabhicharini bhakti was described by Krishna as one of the items of knowledge. What is that verse? 13th chapter. Bhaktir avyabhicharini. Mai ananya yogena. Mai cha ananya yogena bhaktir avyabhicharini. So without deviating the mind, completely concentrating the mind exclusively in devotional service to Krishna, such devotional service immediately elevates one to the spiritual platform, and such a person is considered to be above the influence of the modes. Mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityeta. Brahma bhuyaya kalpate comes to the spiritual platform. So that is the basis for telling why a devotee who is engaged in pure devotional service is unaffected by the modes, therefore no reactions. And also Prabhupada explains, an advanced devotee does not live within the material body, but within his spiritual body. An advanced devotee who is completely engaged in devotional service, he does not live in a material body. Even though he is in the material body, actually he lives within a spiritual body. How is that? Srila Prabhupada gives an example. Just as a dry coconut detached from the coconut husk, even though within the husk. In the beginning, that coconut kernel is attached to the shell. But as it begins to dry up, it will separate from the shell. And if it becomes completely dry, then it completely separates from the shell. And when you shake it, you can hear inside that dry coconut making the sound, completely separate from the shell, though it is within the shell. Exactly like that, a pure devotee's body is therefore called Chinmaya Sharira, spiritualized body. In other words, a devotee's body is not connected with material activities, and as such, a devotee is always liberated. Devotee's body is not connected. Devotee's body is not connected with material activities. He performs all his activities for Krishna. Iha yasya harer dasya karmana manasagira. Same thing Prabhupada quotes. The important point is that how do we engage our body, mind, senses, our words, everything in Krishna's service. So Prabhupada says that when one is liberated from the material qualities, the characteristic is he does not do anything for his personal sense gratification. At that time, all activities performed by him are absolute. This is one thing that Srila Prabhupada identified. Wherever he traveled in the world, he did not see variety in terms of language or dress or any of their externals. He saw their consciousness irrespective of their nationality or their culture or whatever. Everywhere, people's consciousness is generally absorbed in sense gratification. All their activities are generally performed for sense gratification. This is a common thing everywhere in the material world. Not only on this planet, even in the heavenly planets, even in the lower planets, everywhere. Material existence means people are engaged in activities for sense gratification. Whereas a devotee does not act for sense gratification. One acts on behalf of the body, and at the same time he acts to be liberated. In the conditioned state, a devotee has got two kinds of activities. One set of activities he performs on behalf of the body. That means for the bodily maintenance, whatever is done. Those are material activities. And then he also acts to become liberated. He performs spiritual activities. That's not difficult to understand. So, the devotee performs two kinds of activities in the conditioned state. That's the beginning of devotional service. That's a neophyte stage. But we have to make advancement to come to this liberated stage. And how does it happen? When the devotee is completely free from all material desires or all material qualities, he transcends the duality of action for the body and the soul. Then the bodily concept of life is completely over. So sometimes devotees wonder, as full-time devotees, we are doing everything in Krishna consciousness. So have I become free from the bodily concept? Have I transcended the modes? How do I know? So for that, Srila Prabhupada says, when there is no different activities for maintaining the body and for the sake of the soul, there are no two sets of activities. All activities are done for Krishna. Then what about maintaining the body? That becomes incidental. It becomes incidental. There is no separate need for any separate activity for the sake of bodily maintenance. How does it work? Srila Prabhupada explains that when one is liberated from the desires of sense gratification, he has no longer to suffer the reactions of lamentation or illusion. No more any desire for sense gratification. No more any desire for sense gratification. No desire for sense gratification. Completely by constant engagement in devotional service, the mind becomes purified. The mind becomes purified. The mind is the storehouse of all desires. You should understand the conditioned soul means there is a material mind. And that material mind is a storehouse of all kinds of desires, material desires. So gradually, by engaging in devotional service, in pure devotional service, the mind becomes purified. How does the mind become purified? Because one is acting always for Krishna, not for one's own sense gratification. Not engage in satisfying one's own desires. There is no personal desire. There is no personal desire. Only desiring for Krishna. So when that stage is attained, one is liberated. One is above the mode, situated on the spiritual platform. One is completely freed from all reactions. No more reactions. So this is described when one does not do separate activities for the maintenance of the body and for the sake of the soul. This stage is called the stage of oneness, or merging into the existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because this verse talks about lineshu, merging. So Srila Prabhupada clarifies that the Mayavadi conception of merging is they want to give up their individuality, because they consider that individuality while in this material world as material. Actually, when one thinks he is the body, then he thinks in terms of material individuality. That's a fact. But there is spiritual individuality of every soul, every spirit soul. That spiritual individuality is explained by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as our Swarupa, our constitutional position. Jivera Swarupa Nityera Krishna Das. So our spiritual individuality is we are eternal servant of Krishna. This is spiritual individuality. So this spiritual individuality cannot be killed, cannot be given up. That means servitorship remains. Therefore, even in the material condition, everyone is acting as servant. Everyone is acting as servant. Because that's our eternal nature, eternal position. We cannot give it up, even in the material condition. So, devotees understand merging into the existence of the Supreme means my individuality remains as much as the individuality of the Supreme. So in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 2nd chapter, right in the beginning, 12th verse, Krishna says, Natve vaham jatunasam natvam neme janadipaha na chaivana bhavishyamaha sarve vayam ataparam. So this is the key verse which explains individuality of individuality of Arjuna and individuality of all the people assembled on the battlefield. Everyone. Everyone's individuality is explained in this verse, and Prabhupada writes elaborate purport, refuting all Mayavada arguments. So this individuality is very important to understand. Individuality is never lost, even after liberation. It's not lost. Though there is an attempt by the Mayavadis to lose that identity, to lose that individuality, to lose their individuality. There is an attempt by what they think is they can become one with the Supreme by merging themselves in the existence of the Supreme Lord, of the Supreme. That is, by merging themselves in Brahma Jyoti. In several places in the Upanishads, it is explained one should give up this bodily concept and one should give up this idea that I am separate from the Lord, or that I have no connection or nothing to do with the Lord, and become one with the Lord. So it is described in the Upanishads, one should become one with Brahman, Brahmaikya, Brahmalina. In the Narayana Upanishad, there is a statement, Narayana Sayujya Mamapnoti. Those who have chanted or recited this, you remember? Narayana Sayujya Mamapnoti. One attains oneness with Narayana, the Supreme Lord. So what is that oneness? That oneness is not that I lose my individuality or I become God or I become Narayana. No. That oneness is I realize my spiritual quality, same as the spiritual quality of Narayana. The qualitative oneness. It's a qualitative oneness. Because in our present condition, we are thinking in terms of matter. We are thinking in terms of body or mind. So, that thinking or that understanding is completely wrong. I am not matter. I am not material. I am not this material body. I am not this material mind. Nobody is material mind or body. Everyone is spiritual person or spiritual identity, spirit soul. So to realize that is called Narayana Sayujya or Brahma Sayujya. But the quantitative difference between ourselves and the Supreme Lord always remains. In all conditions, quantitatively, we are very, very, very small, very tiny. That's why Anu and Vibhu, these two terms are used in the Bhagavad Gita. Anu Atma, Vibhu Atma. In the 10th chapter, it's called Vibhuti Yoga. Vibhuti Yoga. All the chapters of Bhagavad Gita are called yoga, because Bhagavad Gita is Yoga Shastra. So Vibhuti Yoga is describing the opulences of the Absolute in this material world. So those opulences are actually Krishna's opulences. But they are manifest in different forms of living beings or different forms of the material variety. But it is the opulence of the Lord in this material world. It's Krishna's opulence. Yad yad vibhuti mat sattvam Srimad urjitameva va tattadeva vagachatvam mama teja amsha sambhavam. It is simply a very, very small, tiny amount of the splendor of this Supreme Lord Krishna. That's what Krishna explains in the 10th chapter. It is Krishna's opulence, not our opulence. not anybody's opulence, Krishna's opulence. So Krishna gives or grants that opulence to somebody, but it is Krishna's opulence. So Krishna is Vibhu, and he remains Vibhu always, eternally, and we are Anu, and we always remain Anu every time. So quantitative difference always exists. So this the Mayavadis don't recognize the quantitative difference. So this is where the Mayavada philosophy is completely wrong. The quantitative difference is never recognized by them. So when one completely becomes free from all desires for sense gratification by fully purifying the mind of all such material desires. I mean, we can experience those who begin Krishna consciousness, they lose desires for material enjoyment. So that losing desire is nothing but purification of the mind. Purification of the mind. So go on doing activities in Krishna consciousness. More you are absorbed in such activities, more your mind becomes free from such desires for your personal enjoyment, material enjoyment. Then a stage will come, no more material desires. No more material desires. It takes some time, but definitely there is a stage in the life of a devotee who's continuously engaged all the time. That all material desires are completely over, finished. No more material desire. That is when there is no separate action for the maintenance of the body and separate action for the soul. Spiritual and material, this duality is completely over at that stage. Like you see the life of a pure devotee, Srila Prabhupada's own life, or you read any biography of any pure devotee, any great acharya. You don't see in their life, Prabhupada very nicely explains that in one place. I'll just read that. He says, Prabhupada says in another place, if the mind is purified by Krishna consciousness, one will naturally in the future get a body that is spiritual and full of Krishna consciousness. Such a body is our original form. Every living entity is constitutionally an eternal servant of Krishna. That's what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says. If a person is engaged in devotional service of the Lord, he is to be considered liberated soul even in this life, as confirmed by Rupa Goswami. So, the Krishna consciousness movement is based on this principle. We must teach people to absorb themselves always in the service of the Lord, because that position is their natural position. One who is always serving the Lord is to be considered already liberated. Now here, Prabhupada explains one more thing, that generally people think, if I'm entangled in household affairs, I better take sannyas and go to the forest and perform spiritual activities. But actually, the real way to become detached is not simply to change one's position, especially in this present age. People take to sannyas to become free from the reactions of fruitive activity. But what we should understand is, one who does not receive the results of his actions, but offers them instead to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, certainly remains in a liberated condition. If one engages himself in the service of the Lord through his life, wealth, words, intelligence, and everything he possesses, he'll always be liberated. Such a person is called Jivan Mukta, one who is liberated even during this lifetime. Devoid of Krishna consciousness, those who engage in material activities simply become more and more entangled in material bondage. They have to suffer or enjoy. the results of their activities. This Krishna consciousness movement is therefore the greatest boon to humanity because it keeps one always engaged in Krishna's service. The devotees of Krishna think of Krishna, act for Krishna, eat for Krishna, sleep for Krishna, and work for Krishna. So this is Prabhupada's explanation. How one can completely engage in devotional service, then there is no distinction between what I perform for my body and what I perform for my soul. Or there is no distinction between material activity and spiritual activity. No more such distinction. Everything is done for Krishna. Thus, everything is engaged in the service of Krishna. A total life in Krishna consciousness saves one from material contamination. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says something very interesting. If one is so expert that he can engage everything or dovetail everything in the service of Krishna, then to give up the material world would be a great blunder. To give up the material world would be a great blunder. One should learn how to dovetail everything in the service of the Lord, for everything is connected with Krishna. Nothing in the material world is ours. Nothing in the material world is material. Everything is Krishna's, everything is spiritual. So that is the real purpose of life and secret of success. The third chapter of Bhagavad Gita specifically considers material activities for the purpose of sense gratification and material activities for the purpose of satisfying the Supreme Lord. The whole third chapter is particularly stressing on these two types of activities. The conclusion is that these are not one and the same. You should make distinction between material activities for sense gratification and material activities performed for purpose of satisfying the Supreme Lord. Material activities, sense gratification are the cause of material bondage, whereas the very same activities for the satisfaction of Krishna are the cause of liberation. How the same activity can be the cause of bondage and liberation can be explained by an example. So Prabhupada says, one may get indigestion due to eating too many milk preparations, condensed milk, sweet rice and so on. But even though there is indigestion, another milk preparation, yogurt mixed with black pepper and salt, will immediately cure these maladies. So, the very same activities we perform for sense gratification, which are the cause of bondage, if they are done in devotional service, they are done for the sake of Krishna, then they become the cause of liberation. So, this is the principle of Krishna consciousness. So, this art of doing everything, all material activities in Krishna consciousness or for the sake of Krishna or in devotional service has to be learnt from the expert spiritual master or his representative. That's why there is a need for guidance, expert guidance. That's why Rupa Goswami says the beginning of sadhana bhakti is Adav Guru Ashrayam. One has to take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master and under his guidance begin performing devotional service. Only then it is possible. So, here it is said, instead of going to the forest with uncontrolled senses, it is better and more secure to engage the senses in the service of the Lord even while staying at home. Neither it is practical to go to the forest in this age, nor is it practically possible for people to go to the forest and become detached. Why? Because such a person is carrying his uncontrolled senses and uncontrolled mind to the forest. So in the forest also, the same disturbance from the same mind and same senses. So you cannot become free merely going to the forest. So the real problem is the senses and the mind, uncontrolled senses and mind. So what is the solution? The solution is not to change one's position, but to engage the senses and mind in Krishna's service. And that requires engagement, proper engagement in devotional service. That's why one should associate, those who are staying outside especially, they should associate with Krishna consciousness movement and learn this art from the devotees. That's why you should seek more and more opportunity for doing devotional service, either in the temple or at home under the guidance of the devotees. Then you can actually spiritualize your existence. Then your body, your activities, your mind, everything becomes spiritualized. Gradually, as the quantum of devotional activities increase, you become more and more spiritualized. And that can become 100% under expert guidance, careful guidance of the devotees. Just like devotees in the temple, they are completely engaged only in devotional service. Same thing is possible even for those who don't stay in the temple. It is possible. So that's what Narottam Das Thakur says. Griheva vanete thake ha gauranga bole dake. Whether one is situated in the forest or at home, if he is engaged in devotional service of Lord Chaitanya, he is a liberated person. So this is the way to become liberated even while within this body, and it's possible. And the merging that is described is actually becoming one in interest with the Supreme Lord, having only the Supreme Lord's interest in our heart, no personal interest, no separate interest, no activities of sense gratification, no desires for sense gratification, only the interest of the Lord, only devotional service. And that is the perfection of one's life. So I'll stop here. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.